Hi, my name is Walker Brandt, and you might remember me as Cadet Jean Hajar from Star Trek The Next Generation, the episode The First Duty. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you on Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome back to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. If you're as big of a fan of Star Trek as I imagine you must be if you're listening to this show, then chances are at some point in your life you dreamed of attending Starfleet Academy. Really, who wouldn't want to be part of a starship, seeking out new life and civilizations and all that jazz? Well, literally jazz if you're actually Will Riker, but that's a different story. But sadly, we can't live that reality, at least not yet, but we can still imagine it. Today's guest was lucky enough not to have to imagine it as much as the rest of us do, because she was able to actually become a Starfleet cadet. That guest is Walker Brandt. Walker appeared on the 5th season episode of TNG titled The First Duty, where she played Cadet Jean Hajar. This episode marked the first time Starfleet Academy ever appeared on screen in the franchise, and it's also regarded as one of the best episodes of the series. For a young Walker, this was in fact her first TV gig, and it was a heck of a way to get an introduction to that world. If you think making your TV debut on a Star Trek show is big, how about making your first 2 films with Billy Crystal and Martin Sheen, respectively? Walker has had a heck of a career on screen, and that led her to some great opportunities abroad, including meeting Nelson Mandela in Africa and seeing parts of Germany that had previously not been seen that much not long after the Berlin Wall had fallen. The fact that she accomplished all of this while working to overcome a very turbulent childhood shows the mettle of this person, and it led her down the latest road of her life, where she's become an author, with her new book, Awaken, Discovering Yourself Through the Light of Your Innocence. We're going to talk about all of this and much more in today's episode, so get ready for a truly fascinating chat with this week's guest. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to remind you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Trek Untold, all one word, no spaces. If you want to check out some of our Trek Untold merchandise, you can also do that on our Teespring store, which you can find on teespring.com/stores/trekuntold, where we've got shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers, tote bags, and all sorts of other things available to proudly display how much you like this podcast. If you're having trouble finding the link, just check us out again on social media, and you'll see us posting about it from time to time there as well. You can also support our show by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold. If you're already following us or offering us your support, thank you for your help. Most of all, if you can't support us financially, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the show. This helps more people find out about the show and helps spread awareness of Trek Untold. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our friends at Triple Fiction Productions, who make some great 3D printed Star Trek inspired products for toys and people, but you'll hear more about them a little bit later on. Now, without further ado, let's beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file.
Affirmative. Initiating program.
And welcome back to Trek Untold, and joining me now on the other side of the line, you know her from Starfleet Academy, we've got Walker Brandt here with us. Walker, how's it going today?
Hi, it's going great, actually, except for the isolation still, but other than that, it's all good.
Yeah, it's been crazy doing all these interviews basically right as the quarantine period started around the U.S., and, at the time we're recording this, it still hasn't really changed much, but yeah, I hope you're keeping sane over there.
Yeah, as best I can. You just gotta roll with it as much as you can. It's at the point now where it's been so long that we're all sort of creating this normal acceptance of it, which is a little bit unnerving.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know what day it is anymore, unless it's like a Thursday, because that's when I release the new episodes of the show. Otherwise, I have no idea what day it is.
Exactly. Oh gosh, I remember my husband and I were looking at each other for a few weeks after. How do we keep missing Wednesday? Why is it that Wednesday keeps leaving our calendar?
What happened to Wednesday? I remember Wednesdays.
Exactly. I'm right there with you. I totally understand. We'll see when we all come out of this. We're going to be in an interesting, it's almost like becoming another, we are evolving because, everything changes from moment to moment, but this is a new evolution for us for sure. And I hope it's a better evolution. I hope we come out with more understanding and more grace and wiser for it. It's not just that we've been trapped in a cage and we all come out like bats at dusk.
I mean, I think at this point we're basically living in the Star Trek timeline right before Starfleet begins. We're almost close to those Bell riots now, if we're not already in them. So we're getting close at least to some kind of space utopia. That much is true.
Yes, no question. No question.
All right, so Walker, I'd like to get started and ask you the question that we ask all of our guests when they first pop onto our show, and that's, what's your earliest memory of Star Trek?
Oh my goodness. Gosh, probably three years old, maybe a little bit earlier. My mom watched the original, and she's a Trekkie for sure. And in her generation, no question, it was a moment in the house every day or every week when it was on. And sci-fi in general was. So I remember Star Trek really young. It's one of the first shows that when I think about TV and its impact on me is one of the first shows. And those furry little creatures, I remember those furry little creatures that kept expanding and expanding.
Oh, the Tribbles?
The Tribbles, from being a child playing with toys and fuzzy, you just love fuzzy things. I remember that episode impacted me and how they were everywhere. And it looked like such a fun thing to be able to just snuggle with these furry little creatures. And I remember watching my mom's face go from, oh, how cute, to, oh my gosh, and them not being cute anymore, and how it impacted me, because they never changed from being appealing to me, but to my mom, they were not. By the end of the episode, they wanted them gone. I just didn't understand that.
So tell us a little bit about where you grew up, who your parents were, and what little Walker wanted to be when she grew up.
I grew up in Santa Barbara, California for most of my young childhood. And if you've read my book, my childhood was pretty rough. Watching some of the TV stuff was my escape, but that was one thing that we were allowed to do once a week. So my time as a child was spent out in nature. That was where I found my sanctuary and my solace. And my family was had an alcoholic and violent legacy on my mother's side of the family, unfortunately. But it just was what it was. And when you grow up in an environment like that, it drives you inside. And for me, my imagination was my best friend and my guide with spirit to navigate this new experience of life that I was in as a child. And as I spent time out in nature, I explored in a very expansive way. I was taught through that experience how to open instead of close the doors. So as a kid, the one thing I think I wanted more than anything was to be free. I never really thought of what do you want to be when you grow up, kind of a narrative, because when you're in that kind of environment, you just want to get through. At least for me, I just wanted to get through each day. You're preoccupied with safety and you're preoccupied with survival, and you've got these different kinds of experiences going on when you're in that turbulent environment. So I didn't think about what I wanted to be until I was a young teen, and that was first thing was veterinarian. I loved animals. I have a natural gift with animals that just, they come to me, I go to them. They respond to me, I respond to them. I can sense their energy, they sense mine, and I feel safe with them and they feel safe with me. And that's just kind of been my thing as a young kid, exploring nature in Santa Barbara in the Los Padres forest. It was very wild out there. There weren't a lot of people where we lived. And I'd go for miles and I'd see all kinds of creatures, big and small and dangerous and not so dangerous. And they all just responded to my energy in a very sort of you're part of the environment way. And so that was my first experience of acceptance and feeling really connected to this experience of life. So that's, I think, where becoming a veterinarian came into my mind. And then things went got really intense in my childhood. And I ended up leaving at a very young age. So that was not on the table. It was about getting out there in the world. And I was emancipated at 16, and I went to school and studied psychology and child development to try and understand myself. And then I just was, through random circumstance, directed into this field. Never in a million years would I've ever thought I would have been a model or an actor or anything in the entertainment industry. It just wasn't something that was in my sphere growing up, and it wasn't something I didn't look at myself very often on the outside. I was very much on the inside, so I didn't understand the appeal of what you looked like on the outside until I was much older and directed in that arena, and learned that combining the two could serve to create a fun career.
Yeah, as part of my research to get ready for this interview, I read your book, which is titled Awaken, Discovering Yourself Through the Light of Your Innocence. And we'll talk a little bit more about that book later. I don't want to spend our whole time together bringing up bad memories either, since that's not really, what we want to do on this show. It's all about positivity and kind of spreading awareness of what's going on. But I'm glad to hear that you got through everything and got through your journey to where you are today. And especially for someone, we talk about a teenager or young adult who's going through all these very introspective, self-reflective things. I mean, that's a tough childhood to go through. So again, I'm just very happy to be able to talk to you today and to know that you got through it and came out great on the end.
Yeah, I look at it as a positive. I'm a silver lining girl, so I don't look at anything. Interestingly enough, when I talk to people about this, they think it's totally understandable that I don't want you to go through those. Those memories to me aren't bad memories anymore, which is really a gift that we'll talk about, I'm sure, at some point through this. So thank you. I appreciate that. For me, it's like, I've been graced with that ability to flip the script, and because of the path I took, and the memories are part of my journey, and they are part of what gave me the life that I have. So I look at them as little gifts, and I always have had that nature of the silver lining. And even in this experience we're going through right now, hard to imagine, but there are some silver linings. If you seek them, they're there. They're there. They're around us. You just have to look for them.
Very true. So before we get into your acting career, I did want to ask a little bit about modeling, since you mentioned that came essentially before you got really deep into acting. And I read you got discovered essentially in LA. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. I had somebody come up to me and say, "Hey, you should be I'd like to take pictures of you. You should be a model." And I literally laughed. It made me laugh because I thought, this is crazy. I'm not, what is that, first of all? And I'm not a model. And I was in school. I wanted to be a psychologist at that point. I was in college. I was studying JC. I was studying child psychology, and I was like, I'm determined to go help people, help them fix, and I was in my own self-recovery. So, and helping, I wanted to help others do the same. So, it was bizarre. It was a bizarre experience to be asked to do that, and then eventually, after friends encouraged and said, "No, you should try it. I think it might work." I finally did, and yeah, it did. It worked. It was a huge door that opened, and I walked right through it, and moved to Italy. Not long after I started. I'm an adventurer in my spirit, so I'm definitely an explorer. And the thought of going to another part of the world that I've never seen, and I didn't speak the language, so I didn't know anything about, was very appealing to me, to explore more of what we are as human beings. So I hopped on a plane and took the few things I had and moved over there for for a long time, for a couple of years. I flew back and forth a few times, but I was there for a while, and it was great. So yeah, that's how that rolled out. And then I came back and worked here, and then acting kind of came at me the same exact way.
Now, I read that you got to meet Nelson Mandela when you went on a trip to Africa, and that was apparently a very, very huge, important trip for you. Can you tell us a little bit about meeting Nelson Mandela and your time over there?
Yes, that was one of those moments in life that is a pivotal moment. I was on one of the first, I think it was the first film I had done, maybe the second, early career. And working with Martin Sheen, which was a huge deal in and of itself because I loved his work. And Jürgen Prochnow and Corbin Burnson was huge on LA Law. And there were just all these, established, talented actors. And here I was on this set with them learning this craft and in another country, which is to me one of the most beautiful countries. My gosh, South Africa is amazing. The continent is amazing. South Africa is really, really beautiful, and you feel like you're at the beginning of everything there. And when Martin called the evening before, after we had worked, and asked if I wanted to go the next morning to meet Nelson, it was one of those moments in life you have no idea what's about to happen to you. I had no idea. I was very young, and I knew who Nelson Mandela was, but I didn't know to the extent of who he was. Yeah, I was, you know how we are when we're in our 20s. We're so focused on what we're trying to accomplish when we're young, and we tend to, our world becomes very close. We kind of expand. At least then, it was a different kind of a society where everybody's driven to achieve, and we didn't have technology. We didn't have access to the world the way we do now. So you know who people are, but you don't really know them like you do now. Or you didn't then. And so I didn't have the gift to understand who he was like Martin did. Martin was an activist, or is an activist, and he spends his life in that arena. So he knew very clearly who Nelson Mandela was. So when we walked in, or when Martin picked me up, he and the other three individuals that came with, he educated us in the car because he had the luxury and the understanding of of traveling and doing all the things we couldn't do. And he was very generous that way. He said, I've been at this a long time, and I've been able to spend time with people like Nelson for years, and I'd like to share this with you. And so he gave us a little history of his experience and educated us on who Nelson really was, who Martin was too. And when I walked in the room with this man, I did not expect what hit me was, and I have been throughout my life sensitive to energy. I'm an energy person. We all are, but I sense energy more than people's what they present. I just feel energy, and I think it's what the animals, being in nature with animals, gave me as a little gift, is because they sense energy. So I got really sensitive to that frequency and recognized when my energy would not make an animal behave a way that I hoped that they would. And I knew I could change it instantly with shifting my energy. So when I walked in the room with Nelson, the energy that came at me was so different than any energy I'd ever experienced from a person before. It was such open graciousness and joy. That was an amazing thing. It was like a child. It was like an innocent child that I later experienced. I thought, oh my gosh, that's what this is. This is the innocence. That's what it was he had. He had that joy and innocence that kids have, that openness. And then when you thought about what he went through, and to have that, to leave his isolation with that kind of expansion and that kind of openness and that kind of graciousness, it really was profound. And we had such a great time in the office with him. We learned about what he wanted to do. He shared the intensity of what he was doing. We talked about acting, the craft of acting, of which he was a huge fan. He loved the craft of acting and was a huge fan, again, of Martin Sheen and Apocalypse Now. Man, he turned into an excited teenager when he was talking about that.
Yeah, and that movie we're talking about that you were in was Triggerfest from 1994, and that must have been an amazing set to work on. It's a Western movie with big sets. Can you tell us a little bit about your time on that movie?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. The thing that was the most interesting about that is when I flew into South Africa and into Joburg, it amazed me at how much it looked like Texas. It looked so much like Texas, except there were giraffes on the horizon. There were just different animals there. And we had this set out in, out in this plain, and every now and again we'd see a giraffe, out in the distance, and it was an incredible experience. The people, the actors that I got to work with, and being on that set as a new actor, a greenhorn for sure, inhabiting the characters as deeply and as authentically as possible, and trying to not be in awe as the fan of how did I get here, and I can't believe I'm in a scene with Martin Sheen and you're going to talk now. Trying to stay in the character when you're that new in the business, when you're working with people like that. It was really, I think that's the thing that stands out the most for me, is how I kept trying so hard to not lose character. Because I just wanted to be the fan, I was just like, oh my God.
That's why you're one of us at the end of the day.
Exactly. You got it. So that was what was wonderful, those experiences, and, seeing this new country, meeting people that, have this completely different society and experience over there, and all the changes that were happening, and going out into some of the tribal areas it was like walking back in time. And one thing I noticed amongst most people out in the more remote areas is the joy and the lightness of their spirit, just the excitement to see us and to share their culture and to share who they were. It was a very expansive learning experience for me, it changed me forever, especially once I left the office with Nelson Mandela and what it did to me physically. As you read in the book, I involuntarily cried, and I didn't know why it was happening. And Martin enlightened me on why it was happening, and it's never left me throughout my whole life. Nelson Mandela touched the deepest part of who I am. He touched my spirit. He touched my soul. He touched the essence of me that came before this identity, the soul of what I am. He connected the part of us, the essence that's all of us, the light that we are. And he opened that door with that joy. It's a powerful thing to choose peace, to choose joy, to choose smiling, and to choose to be happy is something he did in the face of incredible injustice and contrary energy and experience around him. He kept choosing and choosing and choosing, and he came out of it with a spirit that was able to change the world and ripple, create a ripple in the world that changed an entire country and rippled out to the rest of the world. And to be in the presence of somebody like that and share just casual conversation and have them care enough to look you in the eye and really touch you that way and appreciate you, really appreciate you. I guess that's what it comes down to, is the appreciation for all humanity he had.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing experience. If you don't mind, I'm going to actually take a few steps backwards for a minute. I want to go back into basically your acting origin. So from modeling, you eventually got into acting, and you trained under the legendary Uta Hagen, whose lists of students is amazing. I mean, if folks don't know about who she is, this is a person you need to know. Uda's responsible for Gene Wilder, Robert De Niro. The list goes on, and she's been critical of so many people's careers, and I've heard so many amazing things about her. What was it like to be taught by Uta?
Well, my study was her work. I wasn't able to actually work with her because by the time I came into it, my first study was Uta Hagen's book, Respect for Acting, with her. And Bruno Kirby is the one who studied with her, and he's the one who was my first, that was my first film, City Slickers. And he is who told me if I could work with Uta, she would be the one to work with, but she didn't have any availability. So I worked with, she wasn't taking new students, and she was in New York and I was in LA at the time. And so I studied her book just as intensely as one could without being in the room with her, and with actors that had studied with her, and worked with Roy London, who was somebody in LA who had the respect of Uta Hagen. So her history, her timing, I wish that, I would have had to have been about 10 years older to have really been able to take advantage of studying with Uta Hagen, because by the time she was, I got into it, she was not taking students that were not, like Robert De Niro. She didn't have the time. She was very, very busy with her, A-lister groups, which is, understandable. But the teachers, the masters that I was able to sit in the room with and learn from, Roy London and Larry Moss. Larry Moss he's our generation's Uta Hagen. He's a master and an amazing, amazing teacher. I don't know if you know much about Larry Moss, but he was who I was able to really dive deep into the craft with once I had spent a couple of years working through Uta's techniques and her training and her work from afar and with actors that studied with her. So that was my history with Uta Hagen. I wish I could have been in the room with her. I wanted to very badly, but not my career and my timing was not with hers to be able to get into her situation.
Larry is just as much of a legend as well, though, as you mentioned. I mean, he's another guy that's worked with a lot of very top A-list talent. Again, too many to name, but do you remember one lesson you learned from Larry in particular that really stuck with you?
Yeah, his master class, our exercises that we used to do. The lesson, I think the most important lesson from Larry is, one, it's never too late for any actor to be an actor. If it's your dream, your calling, your art, it's never too late. Actors do this to themselves, and the industry does that to actors. And he just didn't buy into that. So he would always let actors know, always be prepared and be true to your dream, be true to your craft, and know that you'll always have opportunity. You will always have an opportunity. He was always open to opportunity and never let that limiting belief that what we do to, the limiting beliefs that we often box ourselves in with get in the way of the art. He always pushed that out. And the exercises that he did with us to open us and to connect with one another and to reach that authentic place of inhabiting the reality of the character, he was so meticulous about, and is, no doubt, so meticulous. I imagine he's only gotten more over the years, about each nuance that makes human beings so interesting, and giving yourself the freedom to be in that without judgment. That's probably the most important lesson of Larry Moss, for me, was his acceptance of all the facets of what humanity is and what we are, and to play them as truthfully and authentically as you can. Don't hide what your mind tells you is not appealing. Human beings are complex, and trying to be something because it looks better or you think it's more acceptable isn't truth. And acting, the craft of acting, is truth, no matter how difficult it is to present in whatever circumstance it is you're performing. You've got to be in your truth there. You've got to be in the truth of the moment.
Yeah, that's a great lesson to learn.
It's a life lesson. That's where acting and life the craft of acting and life are very similar. We're on the stage of life. Acting is on a stage within the stage of life, sharing stories of life. So it's really important to keep it truthful.
I'm like, how do I even take it from there? Because that's such a good piece of advice. So I'd like to jump into your first role, at least your first role according to IMDb, and sometimes they're not right, but the first role I see that I believe you were in was in City Slickers, and you did a scene with Jake Gyllenhaal in that movie, correct?
Yes, I did. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, tell us a little bit about working with a young Jake Gyllenhaal. This is before he was like really big. What do you remember from that?
Oh my gosh, he was such a little ball of energy and a little. He's like class clown. That's all I can say. He's like the class clown. He was the set clown. He was constantly making people laugh. He was constantly making people laugh. It was so funny. He just had all this energy, and that little thing he did with his arm, I don't know if that was scripted or he just came up with it, because it was, I don't remember in the moment of what he, how that just randomly came out, where he was making his arm. We all kids love that, especially boys. I can make my arm sound like a toot. I'm going to do this to all the adults in the room, and I'm going to make them all laugh at me. And little things like that he'd do, and little funny stuff. And yeah, that was offset. But the line that he gave me of, my mom said, and the way he said it, it was so his personality. He was definitely being himself in that scene. And it was great working with him. And I remember watching him evolve as an actor and become this, superstar that he is. And not surprised at all. Just say that, I'm not surprised at all. He was wonderful.
Did you get to interact with Billy Crystal or Daniel Stern or Bruno Kirby at all on set?
I did, yes. My scenes were with Billy Crystal, which were the best. My audition was with Billy Crystal, Bruno Kirby, our director, Ron Underwood, and the casting director, Pam Dixon. And wow, what an experience that was, because we just got to improvise. I just came in the room and they said, here's the scene. What would you say? Let's improvise this scene. And I was brand new. We're talking neon green. I was a greenhorn, neon greenhorn. I was brand new. I had no training. And I was just, grateful to be there, excited to be in the room with these amazing people. They were so, again, generous, open, playful comedians, and Billy Crystal is a generation of comedians that are just, wow. All I can say is just wow. And he just set the stage, he just set it up. He and Ron and Bruno set this environment up, and I just played. My interaction was with Billy when I said, you're a man in my book. Even though, he got gored, you're still a man in my book. I said, and that was just what rolled out. And he threw himself back laughing out loud. He thought it was hysterical. And I thought, is he laughing at me? What? Was that funny? Because I didn't know the first thing about comedic timing or any of that stuff. And so, yeah, we just kept playing within that scene. We just kept playing and improvising, and it was so much fun to be in an environment like that. And there was no, the thing the experience that I've had with these stars of his level throughout my experience as an actor, with stars of his caliber, there was never any feeling of like I'm a big star and you're not. It was always just people that just inviting you in to play with them and being so comfortable in who he was and being so gracious and open. And that was the best. And I remember Bruno, we hung out on set, we had lunch together, and the questions that Billy would ask me at lunch, oh my gosh, and how he would put me on the spot with his incredible timing and just a mind of his. It was just so great. And I remember what Bruno told me, and when he gave me his copy of Uda's book during one of our days, and it was tattered, and he just looked at me and said, this is going to be the most important book that you will have in this industry, in this experience as an actor. If you choose to continue in this world, this will be the most important book that you will carry in your life. And he was right. One of the quotes, just to digress for a minute, one of the quotes that Uta Hagen says in her book is, if you are well-studied, well-crafted actor, you will be a well-studied, well-crafted human. And it's very, something along those lines, very similar to that. And it is exactly the truth. It began the door that opened up and connected what I learned in nature, which I write about in the book, and the craft of acting. But at lunch one day, Bruno told me when he gave it to me, he goes, and by the way, we don't all make as much as you think we do. He said, we have cars that we have to pay for. We have agents. We have we have PR people. We have managers. We have families. Everybody thinks we have all this money, but we have all these expenses that we pay just to be an actor, all these people that help support us and that we pay as actors. He goes, you'll figure that out soon enough. And when you're exactly, and he goes, and when you're on a set in some country that you don't speak the language, eating bread for lunch, working 16-hour days, having, sleeping on a bed that feels like a rock, you'll know that you're an actor. That's what he told me. And it was like, and you know what? It was like, yeah, it was prophetic. I ended up doing a film like a year later where I was, in this, up in the mountain eating bread and cheese for lunch, freezing my butt off, working long days.
That's like the perfect segue into Trigger Fast, basically.
Exactly. You got it.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
What's going on, everybody? It's your girl's favorite artist, Josie's boy.
And I'm Alexis A. McCoy.
And we are the hosts of Call Me When It's Over.
We are more than just a podcast. We are a culture cast.
Yes, and you can check us out every single Saturday with a brand new episode. We're available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play.
And you can catch us on our homepage at RigsWorksNetwork.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at _Call Me When It's Over.
That's right. And as always, speak up, speak out.
And leave your ego at the door.
We now return to Trek Untold.
Alright, so Walker, I want to jump ahead now and talk about your Star Trek The Next Generation appearance, because that's also fairly early on in your career as well. And you appeared in Season 5 in the episode The First Duty, which is like one of the best episodes ever. You play Cadet Jean Hajar in that episode. So can you talk to us about how you initially got cast for that role?
Well, it was my first TV show audition, just like City Slickers was the first film. So it was one of those moments where, again, going into an environment with really gracious casting directors and producers and directors that just opened the door and created the scene for me. And I felt a really close affinity to that character. When I read the script prior and I prepared for who she was, I felt very connected to her. I got her. She was part of who I was naturally. So that part made the experience easier. And then going into a room with people that were very open to a new actor and to allowing somebody that had very little credits to present who they are within this character, and just inhabit it, instead of, having to see all the skill from, credits on the resume, all the obvious, let's see, what is the right word for that, that makes people feel more comfortable. Something so simple right now makes it feel more comfortable when you have a lot of credits and you have a lot of experience. They didn't need that. They were just not in that place. They wanted something new and something, I guess, was more raw. And that's where I was at that point for sure in my life. I was very method in my approach to the craft. So when I went into a character, I went very much into the character and lived and breathed the character and opened myself up to the character. And my goal was just to do the character the most justice I could. And when it was a character that felt so close to who I was, it was really a fun ride to go on, because I didn't know often what would happen from one minute to the next when I was in the experience of. And she was a quiet character. She didn't say much. And I liked that about her because a lot of it was what she was feeling. A lot of it was what she would make the audience feel and the questions she was having and the conflict that Jean Hajar was going through was a conflict that I experienced and related to, of wanting to be, the best at something, wanting to be in the best team, be on the best team and do the right thing, and then find yourself in a situation where you don't do the right thing because of your ambition and what the consequences of that could be, and that you compromise your integrity because of being a part of a team, and realize that you can't compromise your integrity. That's the work I did after. That's what that conflict and that look and that experience that people have asked me, what were you thinking? What was going on? What happened to Jean Hajar? What happened to her? And how I see her is how I would have evolved her as a character is that she chose her integrity, and she chose to pursue. She was either going to be a rebel captain or she was going to be a Starfleet captain. There was no other choice for her because she wanted to be the best of the best. And that moment in that scene, in that episode, was where she was going to make the decision. I think it's where she discovered what was her values and what really was her top value. And that's how I felt when I left it, is I felt like I would have chosen to come forward and not be quiet. And that would have been her evolution through that, is she would have come forward and she would have, had to face the consequences of being silent because the leader of the team forced it on, and letting that happen. I had been through experiences in my life where I let people tell me what I should do. And then I came around to the reality that it compromised my integrity. So I understood that's something you do when you're young. It's something when you're discovering what your values are, and you're finding out, and just you're rooting in, you're growing the roots for those things. And that's where she was. She was in process,
The things that you're saying are things that I absolutely noticed and felt about the character when I was watching it. And especially, your performance, it was very nuanced and subtle. I guess I want to use the word quietude, but maybe solitude is the right word for it, because you can clearly watch your character on screen just going through the struggle. And I think for a young actor especially, it's a very strong performance to have, because you're really able to show all that internal stuff externally with a character who's more or less fairly nonverbal in that episode. But despite that, the weight of the camera is typically always on her. Like, it's always drawn to her. So, kudos to you for that very, very great performance of this character.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a blessing for sure. No question.
So how did you like wearing the uniform? I've heard some people liked it, some people didn't. How was it for you?
Oh, I loved it, actually. The thing that was funny about it is I remember when I was in with the wardrobe girl, and she's so funny. The things you learn about shows, little things you learn. And she was like, okay, now we have to make sure that your bits don't show that much. Because in Starfleet, women have breasts, but they don't really show very much. We have to make you more kind of flatter and kind of like, I don't know, very uniformy, the way she said it. And I was giggling to myself because she's like, all right, we're going to take some of the waist away, and then we're just going to make it, and here, I was a model before where everything is accentuated. And so it was completely the opposite, where everybody wants to see all your bits. They want to just, everything's tight and everything's, you're on the runway and you're doing things, and it's all about what your bits do for the garment. In this particular experience, it was, how can you make this garment take all that away? So that was what was really interesting is, the pants were held tight with a little thing under the shoe, and the sleeves were held down. So everything was subtle. Very, very subtle in Starfleet. We did not distract with our physical attributes, and so that's, for me, I loved the uniform because it was such a contrast to what I'd spent some years doing. I loved being able to. It helped me in my character too. It helped me really dive deeper into the character from that point of view. I listened to everything everybody said around me. I heard the nuances, to use your word, of what they were sharing with me about the show through the experiences of wardrobe fittings and makeup tests and all that stuff. And being able to go back into the archives with all the makeup crew and see stuff from the original Star Trek. And yeah, so for me, it was a really cool experience. I thoroughly enjoyed the uniform.
So you got to work with Wil Wheaton as well as Robert Duncan McNeill and Shannon Phil as part of Nova Squadron. What do you remember about working with all those people?
Will is hilarious. He was very funny, and he was into Ren and Stimpy then. That was his big thing, was Ren and Stimpy. I knew nothing about that show, that cartoon, and he was into them big during that shoot. And so we were watching Ren and Stimpy between scenes. He was educating me with the whole theory of Ren and Stimpy, and he was, so he was really gracious, and so was Robert. All of them, everybody on the team, we were all dedicated to what we were doing, and everybody was open and gracious and collaborative. We just wanted to do the best job we could. So I have nothing but wonderful experiences every minute of being on the set, from being on Paramount, from going to the audition all the way through the shoot. I can't recall one moment where it wasn't a unique gift to experience the history of that show. And all the people that, were a part of it had a thing for it, just had a thing, there was just a thing for it. So for that, I'm great. I was in a state of being grateful for being there, and to be, like I said, invited into the Paramount makeup archives, and to see the mask and the to be given that tour of that during my lunch break was a special experience, because I saw history that I grew up with. As a kid, I remember being in there going, oh my gosh, I remember seeing that when I was a little girl in the original series.
But did you get to pet a Tribble?
But did I get to pet a Tribble? I did not get to pet a Tribble. I did not. There weren't any Tribbles around where I was. I guess I didn't go back far enough into the archives to see the Tribbles, but I did not get to pet a Tribble. I would have probably had, not asked me to take the Tribble. because it had such a profound effect on me as a kid. Can I have this one, please, Michael? But yeah, no, it was amazing to see that. Maybe someday there will be a gallery showing where, you know, they will let people see, you know, fans come in and see that history of the show. It is remarkable, really, what they did at that time, what they were able to do with their imaginations.
So this episode predominantly takes place at Starfleet Academy, so you were away from a majority of the bridge crew. But this episode does feature Patrick Stewart and Gates McFadden. Did you get to interact with them at all on set?
I didn't get to interact outside of just, you know, a hello. I'm a huge Patrick Stewart fan, so I was a little nervous about interacting with him, to be honest with you, because I thought it would break my character. Serious I was, because did not want to, and there was no way I would not be able to, because I was such a big fan of his. I remember telling myself at one point when I saw him sitting across the room in the court scene, when I let myself look at him, I kept myself very focused on on our judge and the admiral rather. And every now and again I would glance over and see him sitting there, and I would get that feeling inside my stomach like, oh my gosh, I'm on set with Patrick Stewart. And I would go, no, you're not. You're Jean Hajar. You are not on set with Patrick Stewart right now. You are on set with Captain Picard. And yes, he is a dominant figure in this environment. He is superior to and I would put myself into this, and I would coach myself through it when we were waiting in between shots, and I'd let myself wander for a second. Because I really did want to go interact with him, but I wouldn't let myself, because I just didn't want to. When I smile and when I get really excited, it's like everything just, you know, that I'm in, that's where I'm at. It's like it takes over everything. And she was such, like you said, a subtle, nuanced character. I felt I needed to stay. So I didn't, and by the time that I was actually done, he had left. So I went to the makeup trailer, and I went and looked, and I asked if he was around, and they said, no, he's already gone. And I was really bummed, because I did want to go and just say, I'm such a huge fan of yours, and now I can actually just beam at you. But I couldn't before. So I didn't get to know, and I didn't get to speak to Miss Mcfadden either. So they were both sort of on the same schedule. So.
Well, I hope you get to meet them at the next Star Trek convention, wherever it is that happens again.
Oh, no, me too. I would love to meet Patrick Stewart. I've been listening to his Shakespeare quotes during the isolation. Did you listen to any of those? You see he's been...
Yeah, he's been reading sonnets since it all started, so he's now, at this point, it's like basically day 60, and he's got so many more to go through. We're going to probably get to the end of them by the time this is over.
Yeah, exactly. He's amazing. Yeah, love it.
So this episode was directed by Paul Lynch, who directed 4 other episodes of Next Gen and also 5 episodes of Deep Space Nine. And I've heard he was a guy that was like really wound up and was always screaming before takes, you know, like in a positive way, not in a bad way, but just, you know, all about energy. What do you recall about working with him and being directed by Paul?
You know, I don't have anything that to say other than the commitment that he has to directing and to being. He's just one of those people that sets up everybody to really be there for the moment. Be there, be in the scene, let's do this kind of a leader, you know? He's a leader who wants everybody to bring their energy up and be present in the experience and be true to the story we're telling. And that's my experience with him, is that he just had that excitement for it, and his excitement was he expressed it truthfully and out there, and let everybody know, you know, where we were at that moment. Let's do this kind of a thing. Let's get into this moment and really be in it and tell the story well. That's what I felt from him. He was a good leader, and is a good leader, a good director. So big job, you know, when you've got this picture, all these elements that are coming together, creating this molecule, which is a scene, you know, everything's got to come together, and to have that vision, to see it and be that excited, that's the way he did it, was his way of doing it. And so I was very much in my character, and as he, directed us, it was, he took the place of a academy leader for me. I saw him as an academy teacher and leader, and I was following my protocols and following and doing what I was supposed to be doing. That was where I was in my mindset. So for me, the way he directed the scene and the way that he held everybody together with his energy and his commitment was vital.
So from what I've been hearing, it sounds like when you were playing this part, you kept it very method on set. Like, you're saying the director was kind of like the leader of the academy, and around Patrick, you were still kind of trying to stay within your character as well. Is that part of how you approach acting?
It's how I did Ben, for sure. I was very much into the method technique of acting and skill of acting, and I evolved from there into my own sort of style that encompasses, several. When I started studying improvisation and comedy and working with Roy London and working with several other coaches throughout my career, the craft evolved and expanded into several different kinds, or several different styles, I should say, of the craft of acting. And I think that's what a lot of actors do, is we evolve in our expression of sharing life and stories. We evolve how we connect with the characters throughout. Nothing in life is static. And yeah, so when I first learned, I really wanted to explore the most respected, way of acting that I had been told and that had been shared with me, which was method. And then in time, I realized that I love to pretend, and that's what I was naturally and am naturally really good at, committing to a story through using my imagination and pretending. I found it more difficult to separate myself from the character when I was deep in method. It'd take me a couple days or sometimes, depending on how long I played the character and who the character was and how the character evolved inside, to shed the character. I found method became much more difficult for my personal life, to be able to go back into my normal life as a method actor. So I started to explore other styles and techniques and evolve my own, who I was and what I learned as a child, that is the truth of acting, just to connect with your imagination completely and share from that truth, and not contain yourself, but express it truthfully and live it moment to moment. Be true to it.
Now, I'd also read that the New York Rangers, the hockey team, visited the set during the filming of this episode. Were you there the day that happened, or did you hear anything about that?
I heard about it, but I didn't. I was not there during that. Yeah, it was a big deal, though. I remember. Yeah, I was not in the space that they came and visited, for sure. Yeah, that would have been fun.
Do you remember anything about what people were talking about with them visiting?
Just how exciting it was to have a team. This team come and visit a set. I mean, how often do you have an entire team, or the majority of the team, come and visit a set, and they're all fans? There was a lot of people visiting, a lot of famous people in different genres would come and visit Star Trek sets. As you know, lots of people that we don't even know are playing aliens, and there are very famous actors just wanted to play an alien, and they end up playing characters because they just want to be in Star Trek. So, and they want to be unrecognizable and pretend to be from another planet, because that's kind of all of our human dream anyway. So I think a lot of our human dream, it certainly has been mine since I've been a kid, is to explore the universe. That's just, I wasn't surprised I landed on that show because of it. Definitely.
Very true. So did you watch the episode when it first aired?
I did, and it was very challenging for me to watch when it first aired. I had a hard time at the beginning of my career. Even still, it's still kind of, I think it's an actor thing. We don't really enjoy watching ourselves as much as people may think. It's hard to watch dailies. It's hard to watch yourself especially when you're in the character and you're performing. It's often challenging. Some people are really great at it and they can, watch it and go right back in. They just have a different mindset and ability to do that. But lots of actors I've talked to over the years have shared my experience of it being challenging to watch yourself, especially when you are filming. But that's why I have such incredible respect for actor directors. They are amazing people to be able to do, to put both of those hats on and do that. It's really incredible talent and gift. As I've evolved and matured and become more confident and understanding of the process of and not just the actor who's showing up on set and sort of in that just that sphere, it's easier to watch. I can watch now. I still feel like it's not me because it's a character that I created, and if it's a long time ago, a character, I have to dig back into the files and find her, and I do, and it's funny because Cadet Hajar is one of those characters that has always been easy to find. Because she deals with she deals with something that we're confronted with in life all the time. Life just is constantly testing our value structure, and that's so she's always been a character that's easy for me to reach. Some of the other characters, it's like I'm looking at somebody completely. It's not me. It's like, who is that person? And yeah. It's interesting. I wonder if other actors go through that too.
So Cadet Hajar never returned again in Star Trek as far as we were able to see her on screen. But were you ever called back to audition for any other roles in any other Star Trek series?
I do believe I went on one so long ago. Yeah, they went with a completely different type for it. But I did have one other audition. And it's funny, so many people ask me about Jean Hajar, that she hasn't come back, because one of the other characters, I loved how they brought her back. Gosh, forgive me.
Yeah, that was Shannon Phil. She came back as Sito again.
Yeah, she's Sito, exactly. Sito.
And Robert Duncan McNeill, of course, he also returned as Tom Paris in Voyager.
Yeah,
hard to forget him.
Exactly, Tom Paris, who I watch him all the time because I watch Voyager, an episode of Voyager, almost every single night. I love Voyager. I love the exploration of being in another dimension, another quadrant, like they are, so far from home, and hopeful and determined to get back and being tested the way they are, constantly evolving themselves. And so I watch Voyager almost every single night. So before I go to bed, I watch an episode. And my husband and I, we love that show. And I've watched all of The Next Generation a couple times, and I've watched some of Picard. I haven't watched all of it yet, and I've watched some of Discovery. Not very much of Deep Space Nine.
Oh, we need to change that. We need to get you on the DS9.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check.
You got to become a Niner.
I'm gonna have to become a Niner. Yes, I just love Voyager right now, and I'll try it after.
Well, I'd say as someone who is clearly a very big lover of the craft, you'd enjoy a lot of the performances that you would see on Deep Space Nine. There's some really great, masterful performances there between Avery Brooks, Nana Visitor, and Renee Auberjonois. You'll see some real masterpieces there.
Wow, cool. I'm excited. Definitely. On Voyager, just to digress for a sec, one of the things that made me giggle when it first started, because 7 of 9 was like the big shock, because for so long, like I said about my whole conversation about the uniform, how you couldn't, everything was very neutral, and then all of a sudden 7 of 9 appears, and it was like, oh, everybody's changed their mind.
Oh yeah, polar opposite right there.
Yes, I remember that, and she's such a great character. I just love her character. It's wonderful. The show's really wonderful. I love the whole concept of, it just is a reflective experience watching Star Trek, truly.
So I'm curious if you ever thought about the story of your character, Cadet Hajar, after the episode The First Duty. Did you ever think about what happened to her afterwards? Or what would you have liked for to have happened to her afterwards?
Well, as I would have liked her to become a captain, because I think that's the track she was on. At least that's what my development of her after, when I thought about where she would go, where I landed as the character, and what the decision she eventually would have made based on what I was working through in my development of her insides, was that she decided and clearly chose her integrity and the truth over deception, and following what her team captain told her to do. She chose instead to come forward and acknowledge her part and pay the consequences, but that would not have stopped her from pursuing her dream, which was to be the best at what she did, and to be a leader, and to be a good leader, and a leader within the Academy. She wanted to be a Starfleet captain. That's why she was a cadet. That was the ultimate goal. And so for me, I've always wondered, how it would be. And like I said, everybody that I talk to about Star Trek, they're like, "Where's Jean Hajar? Where?" I said, "She's out in the Delta Quadrant. She's on a ship somewhere." She's out there. She's got her own ship, because I thought she would either, like I said, be a rebel captain, or she would be a Starfleet captain. And she made the decision she wanted to be a Starfleet captain, because she wanted, unless something went south with Starfleet leadership, she chose her integrity no matter what. And that's where I saw her, is that she chose her integrity no matter what. She chose to be honest, and she chose to be a good leader, and that was more important than following deception for ambition. It just didn't resonate with her.
So Walker, you've been in a lot of interesting things throughout your career, but the one I want to ask you about, I think, is one of the more unusual ones, and maybe you could help clarify some things about this show as well. You were in a German drama show called Die Gang, I think that's how you pronounce it, and in the U.S. it was called The Waterfront. What do you remember about that show? That's an unusual one, I feel like.
Yeah, Die Gang. Yeah, it's the
Die Gang. Yeah, I cannot say that at all.
Yeah, I know. That was the language to try and learn. That was a very unusual experience. You're right. It was. I was a series regular. We shot in Germany and Hamburg, the majority of the episodes, and some of the episodes in Louisiana. So, which was
from Berlin to Louisiana. That's like the name of a book right there.
Exactly. It was intense to go from those extremes, for sure. I flew back and forth to the U.S. Gosh, I don't know how many times in that year. The German production companies do this thing called synchronization, where when they work with foreign actors, you shoot the scene in your voice, but they dub the whole thing, and they have actors there that's all they do, and they are known internationally as the voice of this actor in Germany. It's a trip, to say the least. That was, I think, the most unusual, is when I discovered and found out once on the project that my voice was never going to be heard, and that they had, this very evolved technique of synchronization in Germany, unlike any other country. The experience of working there was, it was interesting and new. I'd never been to Germany before then, except for modeling. I'd modeled there, but I had never lived in a city. I had only traveled to several cities as a model for the day or for a couple days, but I hadn't lived there for weeks and weeks at a time, and worked so closely with the same people for so long. And I think from a human point of view, it was enlightening. I got to go over to Eastern Germany during the experience and see a side of the country that was like literally going back in time. It was, wow. It was like I was in a 30s or 20s black and white film. That's how
Yeah, 'cause
different.
this is only a few years removed from the Berlin Wall coming down also, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a trip, to say the least. The people were amazing over there. They were very kind and generous. I went and rode horses because horses were really were a very important part of my childhood, and part of my experience in nature. And having been there for months at a time, I really missed that connection in nature, living and working in Hamburg, which is a port city. So one of the producers organized this experience on a weekend for me to go ride horses at this ranch in eastern Germany. And wow, I know it's not the most elaborate word.
Well, that's the feeling you had, though. And wow is a pretty descriptive word. People don't realize that, but it actually is.
Yeah, it's some things in life are feeling. They're just a feeling experience, and for not wanting to put a word to it that doesn't describe it, that's the word that comes to mind, because it's a big experience. There was so much history I was walking into and experiencing, and the energy of the place, and the people. Their nature was so different than the people in Western Germany that I've been working with, in Hamburg, who were open and gregarious. Plus, we were artists, so we're all open and we're naturally boisterous and expressive. And the people over there were quieter, but gracious. They had a temperance to them, observing nature. I felt like I was being studied and observed, but in a very kind way, which was an interesting experience. And it was a wow, because it was, I felt like I did go to a ranch and go into the home of these people, and it was nothing like what I ever experienced before, because it was a rock house, and it was literally like going back in time. And the clothes that they wore, their preoccupations, what they did for a living, it was all very much in a time warp. There wasn't a lot of modernity where I was, and it gives you pause. It really gave me pause, and it brings you right into your humanity, right into who you are as a person, because you don't have any distractions. Modernity is a great, wonderful thing, but it's distracting as all get up from what we really are when we're just being a human being. And that is what that experience was. That these were people living off the land, farming the land, and very in touch with who they were and what sustained them in their lives. And it was very simple, very basic, and very deep.
So another show you got to be on was Beverly Hills 90210. And you were there for the final season, the 10th season, in an episode called Fertile Ground. And I imagine by that point, you're in the midpoint, in fact, of season 10. So I can imagine that emotions are probably running a little bit high, since, it's going to be the last time a lot of these folks will see each other not long after. What do you remember about being on 90210?
That was a really fun, talk about a fun director to work with. Oh my goodness. This was there was heavy, going on, because it was the end of it, but it was also a group of people that had worked together for so long that it was like stepping into somebody's house for dinner. And you were the one that had only been there a couple times, and everybody knew where everything was, and everybody just kind of went over and got their cup out of the cupboard. They knew where it was, and everybody, it was that kind of an environment. The cast and the crew were open, and there was this sort of sadness going on too. I felt that the ending of a bit of a legendary series, they really changed TV. And so it was a lot of fun, to say the least. It was a lot of fun. There were just great experiences, learning from people. That was new, and not as new, but still new enough in my career in that environment where I was observing and learning a lot from these from series regulars, and that were on a show that of that level of popularity. And yeah, it was fun.
So aside from acting and modeling, you are also an author. We've been mentioning a little bit about your book already, and we mentioned some of the experiences that you've had that led you towards this book. That's called Awaken, Discovering Yourself Through the Light of Your Innocence, which, by the way, folks, has a Star Trek reference right in the tagline of the book, which is of the human spirit, the final frontier within, which I love. So can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Exactly. Well, that is my love for Star Trek too. When I was thinking about,
I caught it.
Yeah. I there was no way that I wasn't going to include that. It just like flew into my mind, and I thought, there it is. It's been there my whole life. Perfect. So yes, this book it's a memoir, personal growth memoir, and through some of the journey of my life, I met some very powerful people this last couple of years who encouraged me and told me that my story doesn't belong to me, that it belongs to the people that it will help. And I've had the idea of writing about my life, some of my life story for years, and had little bits of it on my desktop, but I never, writing is my secret passion, by the way. I have scripts, I have stories. I started writing poetry when I was a kid, stories when I was a kid. I love writing. I've just not shared it outwardly, but it's something I do and just truly love. But to actually be courageous enough to put it out there, and to put it out there this way, not one of my fiction writings, but this was intense, but it needed to be, it was the right time. That statement changed my perspective on it, and something just ignited inside of me, and I couldn't stop myself. And the book feels like a download for the most part. A lot of what is in it rather is it's my deepest truth and soul belief of why we're here and what we mean to each other and how important we are to each other, and how the light that we are within each other is connected to the one light that ignites all of us, and each of us has our unique expression of it, and that unique expression needs to be while we're here. It needs to be here. That's why we're here, is to be that expression. And I discovered for a while that I wasn't really being true to my expression. I was hiding behind the characters I was playing, and hiding and not really letting myself fully be my expression, because I was challenged and by fear of sharing where I had come from and what I had lived through, for fear of judgment, for fear of the way that my career had been developed, people thinking, oh my gosh, she's not who we thought she was, or, your managers and your agents all see you a certain way, and they think you're this person and they don't know you've been through something really challenging, and sometimes it touches nerves in people, and it scares them and it freaks them out, and they don't know how to deal with the fact that this person in their life that handles things so well was a runaway and came through something like that. They don't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know how to deal with it for a long time. I knew it was a gift that I learned from, and I learned from all the challenges in my life, but what I didn't understand was how it wasn't just mine. It wasn't just my experience, because we're all connected, and my experience can help somebody. The way I came through it and how I combined, or how it would just sort of evolved and presented itself to me, that the reason I moved toward acting, which was not a plan, and got so into the craft of it, was because it connected to what I learned in nature, which I describe in the book. And it brought to my conscious mind what was in my subconscious, and the combination of the two are what I use to heal my life and choose my own story. And I literally choose my own story. I rewrote my story. And in doing that, it diffused the pain of it, the sadness of it, the fear of it, the judgment of it, those feelings towards people that had caused harm to me. it changed all of that. Just like we do with a character as an actor, when we look at the end result that we want that actor to achieve, what are we going to do to get there? What are we going to do? What actions are we going to take to get to that result, to get this character to that result truthfully, honestly, authentically? How are we going to get there? And exploring all those potentials is what makes it so much fun as an actor. Well, that's what we do in our life too. We do the same exact thing in our stage of life. We look at something we want and how do we get there? We start playing with ways to get there. And in some circumstances, we just focus on what we want and we see ourselves there, and lo and behold, like being beamed from the Enterprise to a planet, we just suddenly look around and go, oh my goodness, I'm here. How did that happen? It's because we were doing things in our subconscious mind to get us there. And we were exploring, and we were willing to be open to the exploration and open to the adventure and in the process of it. And so that's what the book's about. And that's why I wanted to write it and I wanted to share it, is because I use those tools consciously and very intentionally to create the experiences of my life, and they unfolded they've unfolded the way I saw them in lots of areas. Some areas they didn't, where I was in my subconscious, where I was being governed by my experiences more than consciously choosing what I wanted to have as an experience. A lot of us go through, I call it the floating head syndrome, where we're cruising along and we're all in our minds and we're not really focusing and connecting to our bodies, which is where the whole being of us is and lives within our whole experience. So yeah, I wanted to share the tools that I learned and the combination, how they harmonized and how they served me to create success in my life personally and professionally, and to avoid living the legacy that most of my family has lived, except for recent, the generations, but every one surrounding me in my generation and several of the generations following have had a hard time shedding that painful legacy. And this is how I did it. And I don't think I don't want it to keep it to myself, because I think it works. I know it works. And it's also a lot of fun.
I mean, it's clearly a very, very personal book. I mean, we only have so much time in our interview today, and I recommend that folks read it to get the full experience of what you've gone through and what brought you to where you are today. But I would like to throw one question to you about that fact. And I know there's probably some listeners today who are hearing you talk about all these things and are probably facing some tough questions about things in their own life. Because really right now, let's face it, we're in a real period of upheaval and change, whether it's by choice or by the fact that we have no choice and the world is just an evolving place. So what would your advice be for a listener today for ways that they could start looking for answers in their own lives?
To remember that when we are young, going into the unknown isn't something that we ever feared. In fact, the unknown was something we embraced and were excited to experience. It's what we do naturally. It's a gift we have as a human being, to explore the unknown and to walk into it expecting it to be what we want it to be, to not allow the pressure of the world around and the influences of other people to rob you of that innocence and that exploration and what you choose to learn and to bring into your future, into your next day and your next moment from this experience. Because you're an adventurer in space and time. We all are. And our experiences are the direct result of our choices. So give yourself the gift of being patient with yourself. Remember those moments. If you're a parent and you remember those moments when you were so excited about your child holding onto your fingers and taking that first tiny little step, be that tender and gracious with yourself and let yourself take a little step and expect it to be something new and better and good for you and not something that is worse for you. because that's the influence of the world around us. And that's a very contracted space to only be in, when in truth, we are infinite. Our expanse is just that. We are an expanding being. And when people are afraid like they are right now, and we are forced into connection by an unknown, unseen thing, and you and I both know there are so many Star Trek episodes and so many different series that deal with the unknown thing that comes in to the environment and shakes everyone up. And until they see what it is, they don't know what to do, and they panic and they go through all the different emotions. That's normal. That's humanity. That's what we do. We go through all that. Allow it to happen. Be patient and kind, and don't stop exploring and don't stop adventuring, because it seems like it's out of your control. What's out of our control is truly all of it, in my opinion. We aren't in control. And that's the beauty of being alive, is that each day we can make we can draw a new picture, and we can make a new choice, and we can expand ourselves into something unseen before and unexperienced. And by doing it, change our environment and then change our world around us.
Yeah, that's some great advice. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking. I'm trying to live it every day too. I'm right there with everyone. And not every day do I get up and grab the fingers and help myself gently. Sometimes I fall straight on my face and I skin my knees and I bruise my ankles. And you know what? It happens. It's what we're going through. We just got to be there for each other.
So, Walker, what is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
That it never ends, and it is an endless adventure into the unknown and surprise. It's the surprise of thinking you know it all and then being completely blown away at the discovery of something new. Well, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for giving me so much of your time, and I appreciate it. And it was a lot of fun, truly. You really brought me into some memories and some time in my career and life that I hadn't been down those paths for a while. So I appreciate you for doing that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for giving us all the time today as well. It's been really fun walking down memory lane, hearing about all the things Star Trek, acting, and everything else you're doing these days. So, thank you again, and we wish you much success with your book and everything else that you're doing these days. And hopefully we get to meet you at a Star Trek convention sometime whenever things open up in the world again. Yes, I'm working on a play right now, so I'm excited. That will be in the next year or so. You'll be hearing about it. I'm excited. Awesome. I'm excited. And I hope in the meantime you start Deep Space Nine. You need to get on that.
Absolutely. I would. Exactly.
That's your homework.
We'll get into Deep Space Nine. And perhaps, you never know, you might end up seeing Captain Hajar somewhere. You just never know. We just never know. Wouldn't it?
Oh, that'd be great. All right. Thank you, Walker. Have a good day.
All right. Have a great rest of the day, and take care and be well to you and your family.
So that was our discussion with Walker Brandt, whose positivity and great attitude towards life I think really shone through in this interview. Speaking with Walker was a joy, and I hope you enjoyed hearing her stories today as well. When the episode The First Duty was being developed, there was a lot of internal debate about the subject matter. Written by Ronald D. Moore, this episode was meant to be a bit of a throwback to his time spent in the ROTC in college. Rick Berman was not too fond of the script's concept initially, and even after he did come around, there were still debates about how severe the crime that the cadets committed would be and what the outcome of the episode would be. Moore would write another episode about a group of cadets some years later on Deep Space Nine, with the episode Valiant, that I also recommend watching this week in addition to The First Duty if you already haven't done that. And a reminder, you can check out Walker's book Awaken, Discovering Yourself Through the Light of Your Innocence on Amazon.com, which you can also get for free if you have a subscription to Kindle Unlimited. If you're someone who isn't really into self-help books, I wouldn't necessarily even classify Walker's book as that. Awaken is more of an autobiography with reflections on the lessons she learned along the way, with the intent of opening up the reader, yourself, to examine your own past and see where it led you, how it's controlled you, and what you can do with that knowledge to lead a better life today. Alright, that does sound like a self-help book, but as much as it is, It's much easier to relate to than the typical self-help book. And if you're going through some tough times in your life these days or have some questions that you're trying to answer, I recommend checking out her book. It might resonate with you. And besides, what's the worst that can happen? It could change your life. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Trek Untold. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this show, and if you can, leave a review and rating. We would appreciate it very much if you did. You can also follow us on social media. Just look for Trek Untold on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you there, and of course, we'd like to hear your thoughts about this week's episode. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can check out patreon.com/TrekUntold to learn how you can keep our ship operating at full power. And you can also check out some of our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold. Once again, thank you to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions, and shout out to Scott Ray for setting up this interview. If you'd like to book this week's guest for a convention appearance or an autograph signing event, email Scott at scottray67@aol.com. This has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.